righty. Well, thank you, and good afternoon. Yes, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the trials that we've done over the years and some of the ways we're trying to handle some of the information. So first off, just a little bit about Tennessee. And if you look at Tennessee, if you go from the east part of Tennessee to the west, we've got 7 major physiographic regions in the state, and it's really quite an interesting state to work because there's so many differences. In the mountains in the east, of course, we don't have a lot of ag ground, but you know there is some good production potential there for caneberries, especially raspberries. The Grand Valley around Knoxville is a major area that is really made for small fruits because of the way the population has increased and so on. Traditional agriculture has changed, and so small fruit crops have got a real place there. As we go west, we go up about 1,000 feet up onto the Cumberland Plateau. Cumberland Plateau is a flat area that extends about 55 miles from the east to the west side. And the soils up there are shale, sandstone-derived soils, tend to be relatively shallow and not very fertile, but they respond very well to fertilizer. In fact, some of the highest corn yields that we've recorded in our trials have been on the plateau. And then as you go off the plateau into the Highland Rim, we have an eastern and the western region. Eastern Highland Rim is pretty good ground. It's limestone derived, fairly fertile, nice cropland. The Central Basin, which includes Nashville, and on south is some good farmland down here. It's getting filled up with people up in this area. And then as we move farther west, we see a real change from the 15 to 18 to 24-inch depth, soil depth over here to topsoils running anywhere from 30 to 100 feet deep. The loess soils that blew in from Amanda will thank Arkansas for your contribution and some of the people to our west. But so as you work across the state in some of these crops, you can't do a trial one place in the state and hope to extrapolate that information to other parts. And so a lot of what we do is going to be duplicated or replicated in different places. And I've indicated our main stations where we do fruit and vegetable work. The Northeast Tennessee station is at the foot of the mountains. Knoxville is E-Track. Up on the plateau, we've got a station. We are doing a lot of work at the Middle Tennessee station in the Central Basin, and then also in Jackson. So we've got an experiment station or research education center in most of these major physiographic regions. In addition to that, Tennessee's broken down into 4 major climatic divisions. The Cumberland Plateau, from a grower standpoint, is the most severe area that we've got. And we'll run into more problems with cold injury on crops up there than we do anywhere else. It's really interesting because a lot of the weather that comes in from the north, from the west, hits the Cumberland Plateau, and we never see it in Knoxville. It gets diverted up north, and so we're kind of down here in the valley protected from this, and we can get away with some things that they can't in some of the other parts of the state. But anyhow, those are challenges, and we've hopefully got information or trials scattered around enough that we can take advantage of the uniqueness of each of these regions. This is just a map showing where some of our major blackberry growers are located and where our stations where we've got blackberry work or have had from Greenville, Knoxville, Plateau, the Middle Tennessee station, and Jackson. So we've got blackberry growers scattered around. One of the interesting things in Tennessee from a marketing standpoint is that we've got a nice setup as far as market potential, fresh market, in that as you go from the Kingsport Johnson City area, down through Knoxville, Chattanooga, Nashville, Jackson, and now Memphis, you're never very far from a major market. So that's a good thing for our growers, and almost all of our fruit production is going direct retail. I started at UT in 1973. So one of the things that I did in 76, I put out my first Caneberry trial. Again, we used Arkansas, some of the Arkansas releases, and we also looked at some of the thornless, and found out real quick that what we had and the weather conditions we had at that time, the thornless varieties were out of their element. We were not on the northern fringe of the zone of adaptability, and quite often we were actually over the ledge, and we lost crops a lot. But these are what we saw quite a bit. For a while, they were utilized quite heavily by growers, but we put in another trial on the plateau in 2000 because there were a lot of new varieties coming along that we wanted to take a look at, both thorned and thornless. And so this is a list of what we had. Now, we always try to, of course, get the most mileage out of our planting. So this was a replicated trial, but we could superimpose training systems on it, and that was the main goal on this. But what we found out of this trial is that in the plateau region, Arapahoe just was not a performer. We couldn't get cropping. Out of all of these, well, Kiowa has always been a good one for us, even up on the plateau, and which is surprising because of a low chilling, but it's performed quite well, and it continues today in our latest planting. Shawnee was the variety that took off the best, and of course, Double Blossom came in and decimated that, so it was short-lived. In the thornless area, we did have Chester. Chester was one of the later yielding varieties, very heavy producer. In many cases, the growers didn't pick it up because they didn't want that gap between the other varieties and then Chester. So out of this list on thornless, Hull was a real heavy producer. I liked Dirks and thornless, but it never really caught on. Navajo was pretty popular for a long time. Orange rust has taken it out of the picture. We still have a fair amount of Triple Crown across the state. And we saw Triple Crown and Hull actually were used for wines a good bit. And then Apache came in, and Apache had been a dominant variety for us for quite a few years. Because of the white druplet issue and new varieties coming out, it's phased out of the picture now. In 2021, we initiated a new trial at the Middle Tennessee Rec, which is about 50 miles southwest of Nashville. And we had 11 cultivars in it, and you can see the Flora cane bearers, the only, then we had also the Prima cane bearers, primarily out of the Arkansas program with the exception of Vaughn. We started those out in 2021. They did well, and we've got big hopes for them, but December 22nd, 2022, we went from about 55 degrees to -2 in about 6 hours. And then moved into March. We had 3 consecutive days of lows in the teens and highs in the upper 20s to 30s. So we were challenged on what we saw. So I'll show you a little bit about that before I turn things over to Natalie. Orange rust, as I mentioned on Navajo, we saw it too often. And so Navajo has been phased out entirely. This is Rosette, our double blossom. Shawnee was the primary one with the white druplets. You've all seen that. This is our where we initiated the new planting at Middle Tennessee. This was an old vineyard where we'd had some of the trials of both seedless and seeded for probably the previous 15 to 20 years. One of the nicest pieces of land. The interesting thing about this trial is this station was designated as a dairy and crop station, but they started a Fruits of the Backyard field day, and you can't have that if you don't have any fruits. And so we've got a spot right on the main highway for our blackberry planting, and it's a major attraction. Today, this looks a little different. GM's built a battery plant just across the road, and it's changed the scenery a lot. But anyhow, we put this in. As I said, we had 11 cultivars. It took off quite well, as you can see, as we progressed through the year. I was surprised how much production we had on primarily Primark 45 that same fall. Then this is 2023, and after that cold, and so this is just some of the shots that I took. You can see that the canes just don't look happy. We've got a lot of damage, and one of the things that I've seen is that there just was a lot of bud death and not much foliage out there. This was we've got a couple short rotating cross arm plots, and we've got a nice lot of fruit, but we don't have any leaves. And you can get good spray coverage on the fruit, but I don't have a whole lot of hopes of that fruit. And you can see the same thing on natches here. So we're looking at recovery right now on these things, and going through and trying to assess the recovery of these plants and see how they go into 2024. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie for the second part. I did want to throw this in. Most of you have probably seen this, but this is called fasciation, and it's a genetic mutation where you've got multi-stems together, and it's fairly rare. I've seen it in other crops, but this is one of the best examples I'd ever seen, so I just thought I'd throw it in to show it to y'all. So now I'm going to turn it over to Natalie so she can give you the meat of the presentation.
Thank you, Dave. Dave referred to it as the Fruits of the Backyard Field Day, which is what he calls it, but the rest of us call it the Dave Lockwood Field Day. And it definitely is. It's been a lot of fun for me to get to learn how to do extension with somebody who's so good at it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we've integrated the work that we're doing in those trial plots with, hopefully, as much of our extension outreach programming as we possibly can. So plots and people and programs. And so our goal in integrating that outreach is to serve the widest stakeholder, breadth that we can. So Dave serves commercial and non-commercial producers. I primarily serve non-commercial, but we have a really good opportunity to touch a really wide audience of both of those folks when we're talking about small fruits. And we want to support grower selection, certainly, in cultivar selection and management. And we've also had the opportunity to work with a lot of our economists and marketing folks to integrate this into some really good grower decision-making tools and budgets and things like that. And we also really want to make sure that this is used as a tool to equip the rest of our team around the state, because our county folks, from our agents to our volunteers, are also key voice in delivering a lot of this great information. So in the state of Tennessee, as Dave mentioned, we have a lot of small growers. In fact, we did a grower survey at some of our presentations that we made last year, and 81% of the people in the room there that were growing small fruits had less than an acre, which very much matches with the national data, where our average production area for blackberries, for blueberries, is right around 0.8, between 0.8 and 0.9 acres, which is great. There are a lot of diversified operations. They're selling almost all direct market, but the choices that they're making for cultivars and even fertility and training systems are similar to what a smaller backyard grower can be making. So we can touch a lot of people with this type of information. And as some of us are experiencing in the Southeast, we have a lot of new folks who are moving in, and they want to grow everything on 5 acres. They don't even know if they're commercial or not. And so it really gives us an opportunity to meet a broad range of needs. So when it comes to that decision making, we want to really be able to support cultivar selection, as well as some management decisions like fertility, and then integrate things like crop selection with our marketing folks, and really be able to help them on that sales end of the spectrum as well. So Dave mentioned that we have a range of 12 systems. There's also some work going on in these plots that's led by Arkansas and Amanda that's working on leaf sampling and to be able to continue to enhance fertility recommendations for growers in primocane and floricane crops. So, we want to continue to increase our ability to support management decisions. And the part of this that, of course, that we've worked with the most so far is in this area of cultivar selection. So I referenced the fact that we've done a little bit of survey work with our growers to kind of find out where they are and what might be next steps. And so, we were happy to find that over 90% are already planning or are certainly willing to consider growing some new cultivars. And what we have right now from our grower audience is the highest percentage of people still have some Apache, Arapaho, some Navajo. We still have a lot of people who are growing Triple Crown. And now in that sample size, I'm not saying not in Tennessee, but not in that sample size, we didn't have people that had Ponca or, say Horizon yet, or Osage, or Caddo. So there's some good opportunity to expand, especially into some of the Sweet Arc cultivars, and really enhance their marketing opportunities for a lot of the audiences that really want those high quality fruit. So to be able to communicate to our growers or non-commercial audiences truly the consumer desirability of some of these new cultivars, the blackberries, we want to be able to have our own data. So we did a Tennessee sensory evaluation in collaboration with our food science colleagues in the Sensory Center there in Knoxville. And we used all fruit from our Middle Tennessee from the Spring Hill trial that Dave showed you a lot of pictures of, because all of our cultivars are represented right there. And so over the course of just a couple weeks of harvest, we were able to get 9 out of 10 of those cultivars that are mature there. And so we also, of course, was linked with 2022 harvest data, and we were able to have sensory evaluation with that first year of fruit production out of that planting. And so we got 9 cultivars, over 100 people in the sensory panel, and we tested for a whole lot of different characteristics to determine what it was that was going to be the most important to Tennessee consumers about the blackberry fruit quality that they were eating. And what we found was that these are the 7 most important attributes. This certainly goes along with a lot of the other sensory work that's been done in the Southeast. And so these are the key factors that we want to be able to kind of communicate to growers about their cultivar selection. And so I'm not going to show plot by plot, but our best performers in those sensory trials, not a big surprise, I'm sure, to you all, is that the Sweet Arc series came out on top with good performance of both primocane and floricane producers. I should clarify that this was all floricane fruit that we were testing, all in the mid to late part of June, and good taste out of Kiowa, and many of the cultivars that I know that taste very good. And then we want to continue to expand upon our yield data over time to really be able to give growers the best opportunity to weigh and kind of layer on top the potential yield as well as customer desirability, because we had very good taste performance out of some of those cultivars that so far we have gotten some of the highest production out of. Kiowa, Natchez, 45 did pretty well in the first year of yield data, as well as in cultivar trials. Many good options in that middle range, and we're excited to see that Caddo and Ponca weren't the highest yielding so far, but they've definitely been holding their own, and we're excited about the opportunity for growers to really get some of those into their market stream. And the best way to get people to really consider new cultivars and new management decisions is for them to actually see it. So some of the most fun that we have is getting folks out to these plots, being so close to population centers, being in spots where we already have field days. There's a lot of opportunities to get people here. So whether it's been agent in services, special grower days, field days, which have a lot of consumers and general stakeholders, we've had the opportunity ourselves, as well as some of our great agent educators, to teach and just really show people what we're doing in these plots to hopefully really be able to demonstrate the integration of consumer preference as well as certainly yield and productivity in the decision-making process. And we are not economists, but we have some great ones that we have the opportunity to work with, and so a lot of these trials actually initiated with Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium funding, and we have also collaborated with our economists to use those new trials as they're going in to form the basis for enterprise budgets. And so, the budgets have been made on acre scales so that they're appropriate for the growers that we work with, and work together with a lot of the great members of our area manage folks, and as they are able to then utilize this information to make budgets and farm plans and really help that new grower or diversifying grower, both of which we're seeing a lot of right now. So it's exciting to be able to see our county and other colleagues really be able to take this information right out into the field and sessions and teachings, a lot of county programming we've kind of seen energized in this area of small fruits as people have had the opportunity to really see these plants in action. We have a lot of these same cultivars that are in smaller plot demos at extension office sites and places where we have a lot higher pass-through than some of our research stations. So there's a lot of opportunity there to take these larger data sets, but to be able to put them in context when people are seeing these smaller planted demos. And we do have the largest bulk of those plants in Middle Tennessee, but what is performing well, we're putting in our Northeast Tennessee station to see the difference in a much cooler climate, and hopefully we'll get some of these newer cultivars in a couple of our other regions pretty soon. It's been a great opportunity with picking and tasting and sensory evaluation to get some of our volunteers and great assistance in the field as well as in sensory evaluations. So we're pretty excited about the way that this third iteration, I realized as I was listening to Dave's presentation that I essentially started on third shift, right? So this is the third time he has done these, but it's the first time for some of the rest of us, and so we're excited to see the growth and the integration and the collaboration that these projects are going to be able to deliver. So we actually have a couple minutes that we can, do questions or anything else that is on your all's mind.
That's great. Thank you. There's 5 minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question for Natalie or for Dave? I have a question about the coal damage you saw. The older planting with some of those older cultivars, did you take that plot out, or are they still there, and did you see the same damage on those?
No, the older plantings are all phased out.
They're gone. Okay.
We had, in that 2000 planting, we had an earlier cold event that Chronicle went rampant in there after that, and we ended up having to take it out because of that. But so what I showed you up here is all of the latest in 2021 planting.
Do you have growers that have Ponca and Caddo in the Northeast, and did they see coal damage?
We don't have the wood Ponca Caddo in the Northeast, no. Everybody saw similar damage to what we had. It was kind of a universal cold event for all across the state. And there's relatively little difference in the way the different varieties or cultivars look. Very similar to what I showed. A lot of fruit, no leaves, and a lot of blind wood on the trees.
There were some interesting differences
Yeah, yeah, and actually Washita, and we saw this, we've got a pretty good planning on the plateau, but Washita is gone down now. It's not held up with, well, like the old stage, so, it's, got growers looking for the place.
There's a question in the back.
Yeah, the prime cane fruity variety, are you intending to do a 4 cane crop as well, or only a prime cane?
We're actually looking at, a four-acre crop as well. In fact, in most areas, and this is one of the things that hopefully we'll be able to address when we get the Greenville planning up and running. But, we've got growers that are interested in just the prime cane crop, which may be happening in the upper areas of East Tennessee. Most of them are looking at a prime cane and four-cane crop. We've got a few that are looking at just the four-cane crop. And just as a way to get into blackberry harvest in the summer, just a little bit early.
And is there any yield data available on the 45 or the horizon?
Because of what we had this past year, I wouldn't have much confidence in the yield data. I will say that our horizon is a year younger, because that came out after we had established the plan. So, hopefully this year we're going to get back on, but the data that we have right now, I think is pretty good.
What are the peak harvest weeks?
Peak harvest weeks,
Yeah, so our first harvest, we've typically been doing around the 12th or 15th of June, and it probably been that not 20th and 27th, like that last week of June has typically been our peak. But with that many cultivars, we're kind of bouncing around. But I've done my last picking last couple of years right around the 15th of July, and it's been pretty low. Mm-hmm.
As we separate prime canes from the flower canes and also reduce the drooping over of the plant on the ground.
How do we separate the prime cane from the floor cane? Okay. Now you would, okay, on a lot of them, now we've been fortunate on this in that we have a designated person at the station to look after that planning. So it's been taken care of fairly well, but basically it was trellis arrangements. She's gone through, and I'm not exactly sure what criteria. Natalie did the bulk of the work the past couple of summers because I broke my ankle. Don't retire, it's bad for your health, okay? And so Natalie had to assume the burden for most of that.
Okay, I don't think we have time for any more questions. We're gonna go on to the next presentation, but if you have more, you can probably grab Dave and Natalie and chat with them. Okay, I'm really excited to introduce our last speaker. I met Carmen a couple of years ago, and I got to actually go to Clarksville and look at some of the trials there from Dr. John Clark. So she's just a great breeder with that program. So Carmen Johns is with the University of Arkansas. Many of you probably know her. She's worked with Dr. John Clark for many years and now works with Dr. Margaret Worthington. So we're glad to have her here. She's going to talk to you guys about the breeding program and give you an update. So welcome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to speak here. I didn't bring a guitar or anything, so I'm not sure if I'll live up to what Dr. Clark did, but I'll do my best to deliver some good information anyways. So my name's Carmen Johns, and like Dr. Bladow said, I have been with the University of Arkansas Fruit Breeding Program in some capacity since 2018. I did a master's degree with Dr. Worthington during that time and worked as Dr. Clark's program technician for the last 4 years of his career. And so I've had a nice opportunity to get to know the program, and they decided to keep me on as an assistant breeder moving forward to support Dr. Worthington in our ever-expanding complex program. So Dr. Worthington in this past year has taken full control over the program. She's doing all of the blackberry breeding activity as well as all of our other fruit crops. Our administration hired me permanently as the assistant breeder in October of 2022, and so we're still getting our feet under us and figuring out what our roles are, but it's been a smooth transition, and we've had a lot of support from our administration. And we're as busy as ever and moving full steam ahead. Dr. Clark did a nice job preparing us to take the reins on the program, and so we're moving forward. In the 2023 blackberry season, we had a little bit of a challenging year for evaluating selections. We had some midwinter injury. It's the same freeze event that the folks from Tennessee were just talking about, that we had a really sudden cold snap with sustained high wind chill at the end of December, and a pretty mild fall leading up to that, so our plants weren't necessarily hardened off very well. And anything that had suffered from drought the previous summer really got hit hard. So we had a little bit of, or quite a lot of bud death and even more cane death, unfortunately. But it looks like all the plants have kind of reestablished themselves, and we had good primocane growth this last season. So we expect, as long as the weather is kind to us next week, that we should be okay. We had a drip irrigation installed in our entire selection field. We had been overhead irrigating, and I think that that was, contributing to why we were having drought stress out in that field. So we anticipate that that's going to help us out in the future too. We selected 89 new selections this year. 28 were floricane fruiting and 61 were primocane fruiting. We have moved all of our primocane fruiting seedlings onto our main farm where they can be irrigated so that we can make some advances there, and we've had really good luck with that lately. So we have some nice advanced selections that are moving through our pipeline, and this year we have a new release. So we've named it Sweetark Immaculate because late's in the name. The key things that you need to know: this is a floricane fruiting variety. It is thornless and erect. It's in addition to the late season options for growers, so this is going to kind of run in the Navajo Vaughn season. It does have erect growth habit and the commercial crop potential. So the plant height can be a little bit variable on this variety. It has short internodes like Ponca, but it tends to stay just a little bit squattier, so the trellis fill can look uneven, and I have some pictures to show you guys that. The yield is about 19,000 pounds per acre, so it ran right between Osage and Caddo. As far as hardiness goes, it did a nice job competing with Osage, particularly because Osage got a little bit more cold damage in our trials than Caddo did. And then we've noticed that it has like a slight secondary crop potential. It's not as strong as Ponca, but it will do a little bit on secondaries if there's damage to primary buds. So Sweetark Immaculate is an attractive plant with good health overall. It has short internodes, like I said, but it also has elongated inflorescences. This is interesting to me because it presents most of the fruit outside of the canopy, so if you're not in an area where you're really prone to sun scald, then this could be something that's a very interesting trait for harvesting quickly. As far as sweetness and flavor goes, the soluble solids range from 9 to 10%, and acidity usually falls right around 1. And it can have Caddo-like aromatics. The flavor can be a little bit variable, and sometimes it can be a little bit tart. It begins harvest in Arkansas right between Navajo and Vaughn in our trials. And like I said, the yield is comparable to Caddo and Osage. The berries usually average about 7 to 8 grams, so it's bigger than Osage and Ponca and just slightly smaller than Caddo. So in storage, the fruit store is similar to Washita and Caddo. It has a really attractive sheen to it and nice even druplet set. We have noted that it has exceptional firmness that maintains into 14-day trials for post-harvest, but we did notice that there's a little bit of leak and some reddening, some reversion after 7 days. So those are things that need to be watched. So these pictures are just kind of to illustrate that trellis fill that I was talking about. So you can see that it stays a little bit low. It tends to elongate later in the season, kind of like Ponca does with the primocane, so you can get through your harvest before you have to start worrying about tipping. But it may take a little bit of maybe bulking up plant density to get the trellis fill where you want it to be. But like I said, even though the plants are shorter and a little bit more compact, they still yield well, and the fruit is still of nice quality. So let's do a quick recap of our recent releases. So we had Sweetark Caddo in 2018, Sweetark Ponca in 19, and then Primark Horizon in 2020. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these, and we'll just do a brief overview. So Caddo is thornless, it has erect canes, and it's also floricane fruiting. It's been noted to have good overall plant health, and it begins harvest between Natchez and Osage. The first year of planting, it does tend to run a little later, but that's misleading, so don't count on that to be reliably like that every year. And the yield is comparable to Osage and Washita. Post-harvest handling is good on it, and the growers, what we've heard is that people are liking the size and the flavor. It's consistently an 8 to 9 gram berry throughout the entire season. It can be really, really aromatic. To me, it tastes like Concord grapes whenever it's really, really good and the sugar and acid is balanced well. It usually runs over 10% soluble solids and 1% acidity, and customers like the flavor too. And with Ponca, it's thornless, it has thick erect canes, it's floricane fruiting, and it has extremely healthy dark green leaves. Like I said, it has the short internodes and the primicanes that tend to delay elongation until after harvest. So it's nice that you don't have foliage to mess with or tipping to do in the middle of harvest. And we've heard it's a must-have for local markets. So consumers will return and ask for it by name if it's marketed using the name. The flavor on Ponca and the sweetness is outstanding. So it tends to have quite low acid. This is less than 1%. Most of our data indicates like 0.6. So it's really low acid. And that tends to bring out a really nice aromatic flavor that it has. It tastes like candy. And so consumers look for it. It begins harvest with Natchez and about 7 days before Washita. And the yield is comparable to Osage and Washita. It's a 6.5 gram berry, so a little bit on the smaller size, but once people try it, I think that they're more receptive to the fact that it's not so large. Natchez is really impressive in size, but this can't compete with the flavor of Ponca. It can produce a secondary crop that ripens 14 to 20 days after the primary crop. And so we see this expression more after we've had a severe winter event. So if the primary buds get killed, we still get a little bit of a secondary crop. And it runs later in the season, so that's a little bit interesting too. So, and it has very good storage potential. It can be a little bit on the leaky side, so it's something that needs to be watched if you're going to ship it commercially. And then finally, our 2020 release was Primark Horizon. So it's primicane fruiting. It is a little bit on the thorny side, but less so on the main canes than Primark 45. It has the same amount of thorniness on the petioles, so it'll still bite you if you reach in there without caution. The first commercial fruit was picked in 2022. If anybody has feedback on that, I would love to hear it. It has a huge floricane crop potential, and by that we mean that it can overcrop. So managing it, pruning it appropriately is really important to maintain your fruit quality. The longer primicane fruiting season, it has a longer primicane fruiting season than 45, and more berries per inflorescence on primicanes, so that's interesting because you can get a heavier primicane crop from it. And that primicane crop ripens from October 4th into first frost. The berry size is pretty consistent between the floricanes and the primicanes, which is a kind of an interesting trait for us. Usually we see smaller fruit on our primicanes, significantly smaller. So these are both within the acceptable range of size. And then it runs about 10% soluble solids and just under 1% titratable acidity. So the overall reversion is similar to 45 in our trials. The firmness stays good for 7 days in storage. And we have seen fewer doubles, or I heard somebody yesterday call it lobster claws. I don't know which term you guys use, but it has fewer doubles and heat problems than 45 does. So a little bit about just what we have going on in our program otherwise. We've had a lot of luck with improving our primicane material. We are working on the flavor still, but it's starting to come along to get it to where our floricane fruiting material is as far as flavor quality. The yield potential on primicanes has been variable. I mean, you can see it in the progression of our program that things are starting to crop more heavily on primicanes. And so we're starting to evaluate that in more detail to make some more advances in that area. So we started evaluating the timing of canes emerging because that seems to have a huge influence on when the plants will, or when the canes revert to being reproductive. And then we also look at the number of canes that are actually flowering in a plot. and then count the number of flowers per inflorescence. So the new batch of selections from the last few years, like I said, they're looking really good. Since we moved our seedlings onto our main farm, we're getting a better look at those and making better selections from that material. So some focuses in our program right now, we implemented a barcoding system to help us keep our selection plots straight, and we started using it with our yield data collection this year to kind of minimize some of the human error that can be associated with that. And we are using this app for data collection called Fieldbook. We've used it for 2 seasons now. We have about 400 active selections in our program, and we take 12 to 15 characteristics every year off of each one. So this has given us a huge benefit in being able to manage that data and have it automatically digitized and make better decisions with crossing and breeding. And then our next step is to decide on which database that we're going to commit to so that we can do even more. Our program is 60 years old right now, so it's going to take a little bit of time to get it set up, to get all that digitized. So some of our research that we've been doing, we've had a lot of success with the marker and genetic work that Dr. Worthington has been doing. So she had graduate students over the last 3 years phenotype 400 breeding selections, and the items that are in red here are the things that we had success with as far as finding markers for. The things in black we're still working on. Those are clearly traits that are more complex and will take a little bit of time. But we have good markers for thornlessness and good markers for primocane fruiting, which means that we can kind of utilize our space a little bit more wisely on our farm. So some ongoing research that we have a PhD student named Alexander Silva, and he is working on flowering date. So he's measuring flowering date for both primocanes and floricanes, and we're trying to determine if this relates back to chilling requirements at all. It's beneficial to have this data for decision making and crossing to see which way a cross needs to go to be able to cross 2 things if they have different flowering times. And then we're also looking to explore the possibility of a marker or a genomic selection model for these traits to help speed up our advancements in our program. And he's also examining the intensity of primocane fruiting tendency. So like I said, we have a lot of variation in our program of how intensely and how far down a cane things start to flower in their primocane season. So the hope with this is that we can get some markers and genomic selection models also implemented to move these traits forward and get something further on the side of 9 that has berries that have more than 3 druplets on them. So. Another project that we have going on right now is being conducted by a PhD student named Katie Lust-Moore. Katie is pairing consumer sensory data with GCMS data, which is a process for analyzing flavor compounds and stuff. And she's going to try to find marker data that we could use to move flavor forward faster. And we've done 1 year of sensory, and then she's working on running her GCMS right now. And the preliminary data looks good. It looks promising. So we're also looking at anthocyanin content. This project was funded by the Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium. And so Katie's looking at 12 different selections, and she's evaluating them for early reddening of the fruit whenever it's immature. And so the reason behind this is that we think that there maybe is a relationship between total anthocyanin content and then reversion. So if it has more anthocyanins young, we're trying to see if that relates back to less reversion as ripe fruit. And so the way that she's doing this, she's taking color values using a colorimeter, and what she's doing is matching, the berry colors to the Royal Horticultural Society's color swatches, and then she's scanning those and then inputting them into the computer. And so the color values that she's recorded were for 28 days after flowering, and then she's marking individual fruits she's marking flowers and then going back and taking color ratings every week until it's ripe, and then doing the anthocyanin extractions. We've also implemented, like I said, marker-assisted selection. We've only used this for primocane fruiting as of right now, but we have a highly predictive marker that we're using, and it looks quite promising for us. So we ran 3 seedling populations in 2023, And the accuracy of that marker is going to be verified in the field this year whenever we see expression of the trait. We did run it on 700 known genotypes and found that it had less than 5% error, so it's really predictive. It's a nice marker. And the reason why we're doing this is because it's more efficient use of land and quicker progress in our prime cane fruiting material. So this picture is of Alexander Silva and Lacey Nelson. They're the ones that are running a lot of this marker stuff. And what they're doing is throwing away seedlings that we don't need to plant in the field. So we ran these on populations that we're segregating for primocane fruiting, and we're only keeping the primocane fruiters. So with limited space, it's very important that we do this type of work. We also had an undergraduate student named Reese Brock, who was my intern last summer, and he was funded for a project by the Bumpers College Undergraduate Grant Program. And the goal of this project was to measure firmness using a couple of different firmness devices so that we can get quantitative data for firmness in our program. We needed a faster way of doing it. The TAXT Plus is very accurate, but very slow. So it's not realistic to screen 400 selections. We would need to be running that machine constantly. The fruit firm is pictured up here on the slide, and it can run 16 measurements in under a minute. So this has made it possible for us to, well, this year we're going to do our first round of quantitative data collection for firmness and then use that in crossing decisions as well to move firmness forward. Yeah. So some updates from our fruit research station. Dr. Jackie Lee is still doing an awesome job supporting the extension and breeding objectives of the Division of Agriculture. The selection field, like I said, is fully drip irrigated in spring 2023. This is going to help us really get a good look at stuff. It's so important for our plant health. So it was great that she supported us through that process and got us funding for that. And then we have a new crossing team that has taken over. We had a guy that was actually second generation in his family working at our farm doing crossing. He retired this year, but there was a good amount of overlap and good training. It did take 2 people to replace him, but we also make more crosses now than ever, so. And the things that we have on the horizon, we know that fusarium is a problem. We know that it's expanding its region, and so we're applying for a grant with Peter Henry at UC Davis. He's a fusarium guru on strawberries. And the goal is to screen not only our program, but multiple programs for fusarium resistance on all of our germplasm so that we can make some decisions about resistance. And then we also are looking to have a student examine chilling requirement, bud formation, and bud differentiation so we can kind of be more predictive on how things will react in other environments besides Arkansas. And finally, Dr. Clark's been retired for a year now. He's still around, and he's been really accessible and helpful for Margaret or Dr. Worthington and I. We're really grateful to have him. He's still playing guitar and staying as busy as ever. Best I can tell, he's working on a pro golf career. And Dr. Worthington is not here because she had her 3rd daughter in November. This is a picture of her and her family on her baby's 0th birthday. She thought giving her kids cake would make them more receptive to the baby. And then over there is my baby. That's a dog that wandered up on our farm this year. And I took her home. So if you guys have any questions, I'll take them.